What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 115 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Merriman. Today's episode is brought to you by the Storm Pilsner. In partnership with the Jones Beach Brewery Company, our friends at Storm Marketing have launched a beer available for purchase at the following locations: Rockville Center Farmers Market, located on Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center on Sundays from 7 to 12. Let them know that Storm Marketing sent you, and every purchase of a Storm Pilsner directly contributes to Storm Marketing's NIL efforts towards St. John's basketball. Well, Johnny fans, we are less than 4 weeks away from the start of another St. John's basketball season, and as is tradition around these here parts at this time of year, we welcome on the Director of Athletics. On September 17th, he was formally introduced as the 8th Vice President and Director of Athletics in St. John's University history. A Queens native, he got his MBA from St. John's and first worked at the university way back in 2003 as a graduate assistant in external relations for 3 years, then returning in 2011 until 2017. He became the Fordham Rams AD in 2021, watched Keith Ergo take the Rams to a 25-8 season in 22-23 after Kyle Neptune left for Villanova, and now he has traded his burgundy for a different, brighter shade of red. Welcome to the Eye of the Storm podcast for the first time, but welcome back to St. John's. Ed Kull.
David, thank you so much. Honor and a pleasure to be with you and be with Johnny's Nation here. I'm starting week 2 on the job, officially day 6. Loving every minute of it. It's great to be back on campus. Great to be back home, and I'm really, really excited as I've dove right in here in terms of getting to work and getting to meet a lot of folks. And taking a lot of meetings and looking at a lot of different things. Is hard to believe we already start a basketball season, at least the exhibition side of it, on Thursday at Rutgers.
And at Rick Pitino's introductory press conference, I asked him if this was a full circle moment for him, since he played high school basketball in Long Island and also coached the Knicks in the early stage of his basketball career, and essentially is now closing his career back in Queens. For yourself, somebody that has deep St. John's ties, is this now a full circle moment for you as well, as you take such an important and prestigious role at your alma mater as you try to right the ship here at St. John's?
Absolutely, David. And there's some irony to the Rick Pitino part of being from Long Island and playing high school basketball there. He played at St. Dominic's High School in Oyster Bay, where I currently live. And I've lived since 2009 with my 2 children and my wife. And so irony of me moving into the town that he is from and living right down the block from the high school where he played with Ralph Willard and the Willard family. But I am very, very lucky and blessed, as a grad assistant in 2003, getting my MBA, Queens born and raised, and went to Archbishop Malloy a couple of blocks just north here, the other side of the Grand Central Parkway, and played for Jack Curran, a St. John's man. And you heard my spiel at the press conference in terms of what that all means to me. Dick Laskowski, Jack Kaiser, Lou Carnesecca, being able to celebrate his 100th birthday a couple weeks ago as well, before I officially got started. I was, really trained here, developed here, groomed here in terms of introduction to college athletics. Grew up a St. John's fan, like many, like yourself, in terms of having Red Men basketball in my driveway and watching so many games at Alumni Hall, now Carnesecca Arena and Madison Square Garden, and what the Big East means to me personally. And just literally before joining your podcast here was on my first AD's Big East conference call with Commissioner Val Ackerman, and talk about the league. And media day is next week at Madison Square Garden. That's gonna be very special for me. So it's personal. I've always told a lot of my students and friends, never to mix business and pleasure, but I've done absolutely the opposite in my career, and it's always been personal. And to jump out of bed every day and do something you love, and that really drives you professionally and personally, I'm blessed. So this couldn't be more exciting for me and more personal. A lot of challenges, a lot of hard work, a lot of things to do here. In terms of navigating the crazy landscape of college athletics and the new NCAA and the House settlement and revenue sharing and employee status and NIL. But I'm up for it. I am fully charged for it, and I couldn't be more proud and honored to be the athletic director here in Queens.
We're going to touch on a lot of that through our conversation. You just mentioned the great the great Mr. Jack Kaiser. You're a kid from the neighborhood, as you mentioned, and now you get to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Jack Kaiser as director of athletics. As a kid growing up, you just talked about it, having the hoop in the driveway and all that. But you're not that old. But do you remember watching St. John's basketball? Do you remember them being a part of your childhood?
Yeah, so 42 years old. So I appreciate you saying I'm not that old, David. I think between my kids now, I have two teenagers who are 13 and 14, and the workload and makes me feel tired and old sometimes. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, Jack Kaiser from day one, as I started at St. John's in my MBA program as a grad assistant, his office was right in the main lobby where the Coach Carnesecca statue now sits and resides. So the ticket office was based there. So you go in, and you would be hard not to see him in the morning, or make sure you said hello to him. He took a liking to me, as he did to many people, and he took a lot of pride in mentoring and developing and training. And I actually wanted to be the general manager of the New York Mets. I wanted to be a lot like what Brian Cashman did in terms of being an intern. And I had loved baseball, play at Stony Brook, play a little bit professionally after that. And he had, as you know, a very fond love of baseball. Before being AD, he was obviously a baseball coach and a Hall of Fame player and a professional player himself. So that was my conversations with him was about baseball. And he put me on a number of committees and get me doing a lot of volunteer work. You couldn't say no to him. And I wish he could see this day, because he'd be super proud that I am now the athletic director, filling the huge shoes and the huge job that he did here in terms of what him and Coach Carnesecca meant to what St. John's Athletics is today. But I know he's watching. I know he's with me. I know he's giving me his wisdom and his patience. And I think I said to a few folks, I keep a few voice messages over the years from him on my cell phone. And I could hear his voice every now and then, and it was always positive, never negative, never. And I will do my absolute best to make him proud from upstairs, and let him know that I'm going to dedicate my entire life and being to making this university and its athletics department the best it can be.
At your press conference, you mentioned your family's local ties to Christ the King High School. You yourself went to Malloy, played baseball for the legendary Jack Curran, where you were a catcher. Brother James Vagan said you were a leader on the field in every sense of the word. Your backup at catcher, your freshman year, Steven Strom, told me that he changed positions because he knew he had no chance of playing while you were there. In fact, Coach Curran expected his catchers to be the field generals and call their own pitches, something that wasn't really common. Now, again, it kind of sounds like I'm talking about yesteryear, but we're talking about the late 90s. In 1998, you helped lead Malloy to a city championship, which was actually played at St. John's. James Orante, as well as Coach Mike McCleary, both said it is not a surprise at all that you are in this role now. So how did Malloy and the CHSAA shape you into who you are today?
I appreciate you doing a little bit of some good homework there and some good fact finding with my high school days. I don't often talk about being an athlete anymore, so it's wonderful to think back and the fondness of the names you just said. Brother James Vagan was another incredible man that dedicated his life to Malloy and dedicated his life to that program. It was everything looking back, to be honest with you, David. As I said in my press conference, my parents believed heavily in Catholic education. I did that from elementary school through high school. Mom worked at Christ the King. I attended Archbishop Malloy, and it prepared me for everything in life. Jack Curran ran his high school program like a college program. I think we actually even practiced more than that, because there weren't necessarily practice rules and hours the way there were in college when I arrived in college. So just very, very lucky and blessed of not only how to be the best athlete possible, but how to present yourself, how to hold yourself on the field, how to dress, how to hold yourself accountable, your teammates accountable. And yes, becoming a leader, catcher was definitely a role that I took a lot of pride in terms of not only doing the best I could in terms of hitting or defensive, but also being in charge on the game field, and was taught that, whether it was by Jerry Albert as a JV, which we also won city championship with, or a varsity with Jack Curran. And often everybody forgets about his baseball city championships and how many of them he had. So I'm very, very lucky and proud to be a part of that, because he obviously got so much recognition for being a wonderful basketball coach as well. But Jack taught us from day one of what was expected. And, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of practice hours, a lot of really development into a man that I am today. So very, very fond, lucky, and blessed for my time at Archbishop Molloy. And it definitely, I would not be here, and I wouldn't continue to have the passion to do this and help develop young people and young student athletes the way I do, because you rattled off a lot of folks that are friends for life, and people that you'd always be there to help in any way possible, but also people that they talk a lot about in Malloy, not just for school, but for life. And I try to really implement that in my approach as being athletic director and my interaction with my coaches, my staff, my student athletes, to make sure they know it's not just about winning games, but it's life after athletics.
Speaking of winning game, speaking of winning games, legendary Luke Hornacek said about Jack Curran, he won everything basically except World War III. And everyone wants to succeed at any job they get hired for. But is there a little more want there for you? Being an alum, being a guy with such roots in Queens, is this a little more personal for you?
It's extremely personal. And in terms of a next career opportunity, I've thought a lot about a lot of different things. And one, of course, you always put your family first, right? And this summer was kind of hectic with a lot of rumors and a lot of, pursuits and interviews and opportunities. And, my family and I had a lot of conversations about moving, and my boys are in seventh and eighth grade. So we're going to do that prior to them going to high school. So I didn't disrupt the apple cart too much, or it would have been disrupted anyway. So figuring out what was the best fit. And honestly, it's always came down to, where do I belong? Where am I fit? And I've talked about this a lot, being a first generation college graduate. I love the diversity of Queens. I love diversity of this university. I love its mission of truly helping those in need. You heard my story. My dad was a sanitation man. Mom worked in the cafeteria at Christ the King High School. Neither are college graduates. It was middle class when we could say it was middle class. They wouldn't even be close to middle class today. And not to get political with everybody, but I'm very lucky and fortunate to be here, and they gave me everything they had. And I love that mission. I love the university stands for. I love the opportunity it gives kids in need and first generation college graduates and families of those that understand and appreciate what the university meant to them. And very blue collar, very gritty, very tough population. And I love everything about that. So it's extremely personal that I do everything possible, try to help this university's athletics department any way I can. And, I'm excited for that challenge, and I'm excited to work with people who have the same passion and focus.
While you were at St. John's, you were one of the main people that was responsible for record-breaking revenue from 2013 to 2016, negotiating a deal with Under Armour, helping create the new Big East Conference, the media partnership with Fox Sports that is still going on to this day. I mentioned your age. I'm going to mention it a few more times, but that's a lot to do at that time, especially at such a young age. So how did you have a hand in all these accomplishments, some that are still to this day in effect?
I was always very lucky, David, in terms of surrounding myself with people who either took a liking to me or were able to help train and develop me. And well, that was Jack Kaiser, we spoke about earlier. Jack Curran obviously played a pivotal role in me going to college and getting a scholarship to college, and continue to play baseball in college. But even at St. John's, I was lucky. I came upon um, people like Father Donald Harrington, who was the president here for 27 years. Imagine being a president 27 years. That'll just never happen again in terms of demands of being a university president. But he was helpful and empowered me to make some decisions for him in terms of development and fundraising and interacting with alumni and having roles and responsibility there. He had a young talented chief of staff at the time named Rob Weil, who was helpful in allowing me to pursue some opportunities in athletics. At that point in time, not only the Under Armour deal, where they were a young company and they were very aggressive in the marketplace and trying to make a splash with things like Steph Curry and Bryce Harper and doing some different things. So they wanted New York City, they wanted St. John's, and it was a wonderful time to creatively go to the laboratory and go with them and try to do some unique, fun stuff. They were a great partner in New York City in terms of a young up and coming company, and try to give us a little bit of fresh breath of fresh air and fresh look on our brand. And, obviously that's things have evolved there. At that point in time, if you remember, a lot of realignment was taking place. So some schools had left the Big East, like your Boston College and your Louisville's and Pitt at that time and Syracuse. And some new schools were coming in, whether it was at that point in time, it was Tulane and SMU. And I remember having a conversation with Father Harrington, and he was concerned about the direction of the Big East, getting away from our roots, getting away from our DNA, getting away from who we really were. And we didn't have football. We weren't going to play FBS football. We had a lot of Catholic schools that were similar to us in the Big East. And that's when that Catholic 7 came into play. And I give Father Harrington a lot of credit for the Catholic 7. I know Jack DeGioia of Georgetown gets a lot of credit for that, as he should. And then, we needed a media partner, David, that would allow us to do what we thought was best for the Big East and really be a unified basketball, only conference, and obviously a Catholic, a lot based on and the premise and the foundation of Catholic schools with all Catholic identities and missions. And we needed a media partner that was going to help us offset any loss of not having those FBS football schools anymore. And Fox Sports did that. So I remember sitting up in Keating Hall and on St. John's campus with Eric Shanks and Larry Jones and Jordan Bejant and people from Fox Sports that wanted to do this. I'm happy to say they're still a partner, and the media dollars are essential. You see that across the country and all the A4 conferences. So having those opportunities and having those relationships and having those partnerships and really identify where the dollars were. So luckily, just being creative and just being open-minded and having conversations, and whether it was the 7 schools that were willing to take the jump to the new Big East, whether it was Fox Sports that saw the value and continues to see the value in what Big East basketball is all about, or Under Armour and now Nike that sees the value in St. John's University. It's being open-minded, being creative, and trying to really establish true partnerships where they're a two-way street of benefits for each and everybody and not just selfishly us.
I told you I'm going back to your age, so I'm going to do it now. I think it's relevant. And it brings context. You bring a jolt of youth into the position, one that requires being able to connect with said youth, and requires connecting also to people older than you. Before we started, we were just talking about social media and the importance of social media these days. Do you think you bring a fresh perspective on the job, how college athletics and basketball has changed the modern way of doing things in 2024? And, do you think that would play a part into what makes you a right fit for the position?
I appreciate that. And I do, I agree with you in terms of not only just again, the youth of my age. And I appreciate you acknowledging that. And yes, I think, obviously being 42 years old and having some wonderful experiences, including being on the entrepreneur side of a brand like Vitamin Water, and then obviously selling that company to Coca-Cola and living on that really having another MBA, another wonderful business experience in terms of being a part of a startup company at a time, to your point, where social media is getting started, and where a time where health and wellness and products and brand identity and brand awareness and the use of athletes, not only as brand endorsement and marketing folks, but also using athletes as owners of companies and equity, and creating, a world where influencers and brand awareness and the power of sports today, which really drives live television consumption, and advertising is all around sports, and we understand what that's done, especially in college athletics for those TV deals. And then the Coke, the ability to be one of the top 5 brands in the world and to understand how they run and manage their company has really helped me be a non-traditional athletic director. And there's a comfort level in NIL, and I see your wonderful work in partnership with Storm Marketing, and I know what NIL means for our student athletes. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but I'm comfortable in the idea that student athletes should get paid and have the opportunity to get paid, and and that free market and the value of that because of those experiences. Now, obviously, trying to continue to transform college athletics as we know it to be more and more comfortable in that opportunity of either endorsement, and obviously the conversations of pay to play or revenue sharing. But how does that become a true partnership where student athletes are treated like professional athletes that way? And just the way the NBA has evolved, the NFL has evolved, and those leagues, and looking at that way. So I think I bring a unique set of skill sets that way that maybe your traditional athletic director, who probably was a coach at one point, then got into administration, then became an AD, which was typically the path of a Jack Kaiser and so on and so forth. That's not the case anymore. I think having some experience, not only in finding sponsorships and endorsements, or being comfortable with social media and creating content, I think is a large value, not only just in terms of marketing that way, but communicating with a large population. Our alumni base is large. Our student body is large. Our future student body is large. How do I speak to them in masses? How do we speak to them in masses? Is the use of social media and the use of creating video content or podcasts like yours, and continuing to communicate this way. As much as I love spending time with people, I'd love to do lunch and coffee and breakfast and dinner with everybody. And believe me, I will do my best to do that, especially our wonderful donor base. But this is really the world in terms of being able to communicate, engage, but also, David, recruit more season ticket holders, recruit more folks to buy the gear that you're wearing right now. As I look at you wearing a Nike pullover at St. John's, to support NIL and what we're trying to do there, to buy that new Storm beer and make sure that everybody's supportive of this. How do we communicate in large way to everybody? This is the world we're doing it in. So to me, it's very natural and feels right. And as anything we could do to help our student athlete, help our programs, the better.
You said, I think there's always been this feeling of unfulfilled potential. The time is right. I couldn't be more inspired or motivated to come back and help lead St. John's through the challenges and the future of what the NCAA is going to be. What did you mean by the unfulfilled potential, and how do you think St. John's can reach said potential?
My statement there, that's something I've said a lot. I think we've heard a lot of probably cliches in terms of St. John's athletics and specifically St. John's basketball, and whether it be a sleeping giant or obviously being located geographically in New York City and Madison Square Garden, and it being a pro town. And we talk about NIL, or you talk about fundraising, or you talk about the best fans in the world. We all know and selfishly, acknowledge that they come from New York City. They come from this area in terms of what that means. You have to look far right now, whether it be a Yankee fan or a Mets fan like me, or what the Knicks just did, or what a wonderful experience the Rangers are, or the Liberty's about to win a WNBA championship. This is the greatest city in the world, but it's also, to me, the greatest city in the world for sports. So that, to me, is the opportunity that I think, how does St. John's continue to leverage that? Rick Pitino, being born and raised in this city, one of the greatest coaches of all time, is now coaching our basketball program. Hopefully the stars are aligning. We need to do some additional things here on the business side in terms of generating more revenue and aligning more strategically with a plan to help support that and leverage that. You're doing your part in terms of your podcast. You're doing your part in terms of working with Storm Marketing and our NIL collective. How do we all continue to assess these wonderful assets, companies at our fingertips, the media capital of the world? That's where I think the unfilled potential is trying to get all that proper alignment. And I think even here in the university, president that's done this at Providence already in terms of what the blueprint is, a board of trustees that's hungry for basketball success, not only just to win a championship or to have success in the NCAA tournament, but to utilize it to benefit our institution in terms of enrollment, in terms of brand equity, in terms of engaging the community, engaging our alumni base, who maybe have been wanting this for a while. Again, trying to align all those stars. I think that's where the unfulfilled potential is. That's where the excitement comes for me in terms of being a part of that and trying to build that together.
In your time with Fordham, you stress the importance of the alumni and the role that they play. Now, even more so with NIL being such a main component of the landscape. During the media session of your introductory press conference, I asked you about your 100-day plan in respect to reaching out and corralling even more of the 160,000 alumni or so that reside in New York. Of course, everything becomes easier with winning basketball games, but how do you see St. John's strengthening the alumni network to be bigger parts of the ongoing efforts for the fundraising, as well as coming to the games and just growing the overall footprint of St. John's?
Yeah, I love that question, David, and I'm motivated by that. Whether that be my 90, 120, or 180-day plan in terms of getting started. And I know many folks talk about the listening aspect of it. I guess I'm a little bit lucky in terms of having an advantage of that, in terms of being part of that alumni base, having worked here two other times and this being the third time back. Yeah, I do feel like I have an understanding of what the alums are looking for, what the fan base of New York City is looking for. And I guess the beauty of that 180-day plan, or the initial 6 months here, is it's going to be really, it's all going to take place in a basketball season. So to be able to do that while it's going on, assess the guard and assess Carnesecca Arena and look at what the Big East is doing, and we'll have more direction on the House settlement, David, and the future of NIL and the future of revenue sharing and employee status student athletes. So being able to build a plan against that, but yeah, I've said a lot about now's the time, and I'm not trying to be cliche or necessarily start a campaign, but I talked a lot about how valuable and how important it's been for me to come home, David. But now I think it's really the right time in our world. And I know it's a challenging world, and politically, I know it's a challenging time. And in our city, it's a challenging time, right? In terms of scandal, investigation, and all the other craziness we're dealing with. What a wonderful time to go back to alma mater and go back to our affinity and go back to what we're built on. So I've come home. I think it's time for everybody to come home and bring your children there and bring their CYO team and bring their Girl Scout troop and wear your red. And the thing that we know best, and the thing that we've all been grown up on and raised on in terms of St. John's and its wonderful mission, it's time to come back. I live in Long Island. The top two schools that are being applied to for high school students are Clemson and Alabama. And I guess that's not, I mean, I think, Elon is in there and SMU is in there. Some interesting schools, Wisconsin, et cetera. I think we all know the power that athletics plays in that decision-making process. How do we utilize St. John's basketball the same exact way? And it's every kid needs to be, we need to buy the next generation some St. John's gear. We need to bring them to a St. John's game, and we need to build that fan base for the future, and also pay our respects to those that have been supportive a long period of time, and the older generation of fans that have been here forever and have had season tickets so long and have been generously donating so long. We need to really continue to bridge that gap from that group, that first generation college graduate that I'm a part of, to this younger generation, and continue to do that. So that excites me, that motivates me. I think there's, again, going back to the unfilled potential, I think there's a whole nother fan base out there that we're just not speaking to, and we really need to focus on. And that is truly what I'm looking at in terms of the future here. How do we utilize this opportunity and time and build that strategic plan from top to bottom to make sure that we're growing this base, and everybody needs to come home and learn about what St. John's University is all about.
I think you might have a marketing plan in the works there. I feel it. But, speaking of coming back home, somebody else that's come back home recently as well, entrepreneur, racehorse enthusiast, and St. John's alum, Mike Rapoli. He told Zach Braziller of the New York Post when you got hired, quote, what he did at 3 years as the athletic director at Fordham, he's done 15 years of work. He hired an amazing coach who is now a Big East head coach. He made another good hire with Keith Ergo. With his athletic administration background, being an athlete and knowing the school and working with multiple presidents in the past, he's been involved in a lot of great things already. You worked with Mike Rapoli at Glasso, the Coca-Cola companies. You were one of the first employees hired at Vitamin Water. We briefly mentioned it earlier, but what did you learn in those years working alongside Mike at such successful companies that you brought with you to Fordham and now at St. John's?
I was very lucky, first and foremost, even when I was working here initially as a grad assistant, and then I guess assistant and associate athletic director, whether it be ticket sales, sponsorship sales, or game operations, or trying to always promote our basketball programs with tickets, that, he and I really connected in terms of he had started the vitamin water company, and obviously that blew up to be an incredible um, and revolutionary and record breaking private company sale to Coca-Cola, and then had the ability. He did it again with Body Armor and Kobe Bryant and what that meant. Mike is obviously a tremendous mind, a creative, a genius in many ways, and obviously he's a multi-billionaire for a reason, and obviously the companies he's sold and companies he's built, the brands he's built speak for themselves. But at the heart of it, David, he's a St. John's graduate that loves to tell you how he was on academic probation and he should have been thrown out of St. John's and thrown out of the sports management program because he was cutting class and going to bet on horses at Aqueduct Racetrack in Ozone Park. And as funny as that is, tongue in cheek, we all grew up that way as kids in Queens. And, obviously he was a first generation kid and, figured out the best. Luckily, he got on a great path in terms of the beverage industry, and the rest is history. But his drive, his passion, his love are Queen's skills. He talks a lot about attitude over skills. I use that all the time, and that Queen's attitude that is so priceless in terms of what it's done for his career. It's done a lot for my career, and he saw a lot of that in me. And I'm lucky that he was a mentor and an advisor and a business partner for me in that world. In terms of St. John's basketball and St. John's University, he loves his alma mater like any other donor, any other alum, and wants the program to win. I think at heart, he wanted to be a basketball coach. He coached at, I think freshman basketball at Christ the King. Yeah. He wanted to be a hoops coach. And I bet you he would have been if he would have kept on that path. That would have been scary to see.
I think it worked out for him.
It did work out for him, but his love is hoops and sports, and his passion. He loves, obviously, Rick Pitino, has a ton of admiration for his career, which also speaks for itself in his resume. It also worked out for him, and I think he's passionate about St. John's getting back to its glory days, and we all want that. So, I've said a lot about Mike, and I'm hopeful that he, of course, continues to support our program and support me and support St. John's athletics and his alma mater, but we need him to be a lightning rod for others to come back, David, right? He needs to be a lightning rod to be, wow, his influence makes a difference. How do we get other donors, other companies, other organizations to support St. John's basketball the same way? So I'm really hopeful that we're utilizing Mike to be contagious that way, that his vision, that his excitement, that his investment will draw other investors, other shareholders, other partners to get behind this program, get behind Rick Pitino, get behind me, and get behind St. John's Athletics, because that's what we need. That's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Whether it's future NIL payments, whether it's future revenue sharing, whether it's future employee status, whether it's future brick and mortar in terms of building capital projects and renovations, but also helping the entire university continue to elevate its profile for this institution.
So that's exactly where I was going, because you gave me the quote of your press conference. You said, I think he wants his alma mater to be on top. He doesn't like losing in horse racing. He doesn't like losing in business. He doesn't like losing in politics, and he doesn't want to lose at St. John's. Hopefully, Mike is also the lightning rod to bring other people back. Mike has been very vocal in his support for St. John's since Rick Pitino has been hired. But again, to me, I walked away from that quote about Mike being the conduit to get other people back on board. And there's been this false narrative that with Mike Rapoli's public support starting last year, that the NIL situation would be taken care of. And we on this podcast have been beating the drum now that, it's not the case, and that the saying that it takes a village has never been more on point than when mentioning NIL. So, you just touched on it a little bit, but my question really is like, how do we get people seeing Mike Rapoli's support, obviously the dollars that come with it, but as that lightning rod? And basically, it's cool to support St. John's again. It's cool to be on this apex of where the basketball program is going, like Mike Rapoli is hoping to build. And this is the other thing that I do want to mention, that, yes, Mike Rapoli is obviously a huge, huge supporter of the team, but there are so many other amazing and generous big time donors of this program that are here and trying to help as well as Mike. But obviously, as Ed, as you mentioned, there needs to be more, and that mission never ends. Just recently heard coaches saying that it's going to take NIL war chests of 7-8 million coming up. That's what it's going to turn into, and for St. John's to keep up with the Joneses in that sense, it is going to take a village.
Yeah, you listen, you nailed it there, David. That's a mouthful. And it's funny that I added politics into the Mike Rapoli quote, because that's obviously the rumor out there, the future, that he will make a political run in this crazy political world, in this crazy world that we're living in right now of divide. Unfortunately, that would be interesting to see if he were to do that. But I think that would be on his horizon. That's probably something to keep an eye on. That would be very, very interesting. Of course, his next step of being a political career. In terms of his value as a donor, as an investor, as a shareholder in this program, this department, it's everything. And I appreciate you really highlighting the NIL piece, because you get it. You're working closely with Vin and Storm Marketing and the great efforts they've done, and you're pushing the Storm beer, and you're pushing the events, and you understand it, how many people are involved in making that happen. And Vin was here the other day for the NIL Summit, and so thankful for his leadership and what he's done. And then you got Anthony Zito on the Flat Top Fund in terms of what they've done. And I know then there's our third collective with Rick Pitino and some of his wonderful supporters. And it's never enough. You nailed it, right? And you just try, the numbers that are out there are being reported, and to compete on a daily basis with the UConns in our conference. We don't have to go too far. We're not even talking about FBS football, right, Dave? We're not talking about Alabama here. We're talking about UConn, who we have to fight with on a daily basis, back-to-back national champions. Villanova, which, that model is something I studied a lot of, and what Kyle Neptune, obviously my former coach, and what they've done there with Jay Wright. And then, of course, even like schools like Marquette and Creighton, like they're all doing it on a high level. So we're not even talking about the A4. We're talking about the Big East basketball. And we need all the creativity we can. The House settlement's coming, right? That looks like another large multi-million-dollar increase in financial support in our budget in terms of what the rev share is going to be. NIL is no end in sight. The bells and whistles of facilities. Obviously, continue to play games at Madison Square Garden and do it at the highest level we can. For St. John's basketball, for our biggest games, is obviously an expensive proposition, expensive investment. So, yeah, I think it's an education here where we need to rally the whole village. What I really want to try to do, David, not just you highlighted the relationship piece for me and the partnership focus for me, and the non-traditional background that I have in terms of engaging partners and ideas and suggestions, whether that be private equity, whether that be the gambling world, whether that be, you talk about obviously our Storm beer, but looking at different categories to help try to generate revenue. It really needs to be a narrative of educating that group. So here's your investment. What are we trying to do in terms of that return on investment? What does basketball success do not only for St. John's athletics, but what does it do for St. John's University? So really trying to build out that business model, that strategic plan to show what the return can be from an enrollment standpoint, from a regional and national presence and marketing value, from a community engagement standpoint. Not only help athletic fundraising, but how does it help university fundraising? So how do we truly generate revenue for the entire institution to really justify and show a true ROI for all of our shareholders, all of our investors? That's a big part of what I want to try to do here, whether that be media value, that be impressions, that be social media content, generating applications from future students. There's ways of doing this, and I obviously have a lot of the key performance indicators and the key metrics and data that we want to highlight and focus on to educate, but also show return. So it's not just, we just need to raise money so Coach Pitino can recruit the best players and, of course, win games. But here's the benefit for St. John's University. And I think that's, again, a lot of my non-traditional background of private equity, investing in startup companies and being an entrepreneur. That's the keys that we need to focus on here in terms of generating more and more interest to get behind Mike Rapoli and what he's done here.
Something else that struck with me and something else that stuck with me is when you said that the goal is to capitalize on the now with Rick Pitino to set up St. John's for success after Rick Pitino inevitably retires, hopefully in the distant future. Besides the immediacy of winning, How do you start to captivate and develop the new St. John's fan? How do you capture the students to show up to the home games? What are some plans for game day experience? And how do you build this fan base and get them to assist with helping set up this program for the future?
Yeah, in terms of leveraging this opportunity or making sure we're taking maximizing that this period of time of having the greatest coach in college basketball, overall basketball, be the coach of our program. And coach has been, he says this a lot, so I know I won't get in hopefully too much trouble, but obviously him being 72 years old, but he's 72 years young, and he'll be quick to tell me or remind everybody that he's in better shape than me, and he is. And he'll probably coach here. He probably can coach well into his 90s based on how well he takes care of himself and what a wonderful routine he has. He has more energy than anybody I've ever met. And he's got more focus and motivation and passion than anybody I know right now. So that's what we want to bottle up and save here, David, and make sure that we are structuring our plan, our future organization against those efforts and that potential success that we're all getting behind and excited for, that we can make that a sustainable proposition moving forward. And that is the focus. And I think, in terms of everything moving forward here, it is truly trying to think a little bit outside the box in terms of generating that plan and looking at opportunities to make sure that we are leveraging that. So it's not just let's hope and pray for wins. I think there's sometimes, naturally winning helps, and winning definitely cures a lot of things. And winning is definitely contagious, especially in this city, as we highlighted earlier, with some of the championship teams or winning teams, winning cultures, but making sure that we are positioning ourselves that we can really maximize what success behind Coach Pitino looks like, and success in the Big East looks like, so that we are trying to make sure we're building not only a war chest, but building a structure that is sustainable, and is not, something that is a short-lived or short-term situation.
There's a lot of coaches that have been outspoken about their dislike for NIL and what it's done to college basketball, how it's turned college basketball into a 24/7 job with no off switch. With St. John's being in the top half of the conference in NIL the last 2 seasons, according to sources, a coaching staff that has embraced the work that has to go into recruiting and NIL, and obviously you coming on board, do you think it puts St. John's and its basketball program in a more advantageous position given everybody has bought into the changing landscape and what needs to get done?
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of outspokenness about NIL and a little bit of distaste in terms of ruining amateurism and scholarship athletes and the value of education the way we know it, or the value of a scholarship education the way it's always been perceived. And I was raised that way. I think you were raised that way in terms of obviously the value of education. And I think I would add that it's not just exclusive to athletics. You're seeing a lot of ADs retire. You're seeing a lot of basketball coaches retire, or football coaches like Saban and Jay Wright retire. And but you're also seeing, David, a lot of university presidents retire. I think it's relative to overall education these days. The value proposition on education is being scrutinized more than ever. You probably have heard a little bit about the enrollment cliff, or the population cliff of the ages of students who are eligible to go to college at this age. You're hearing a lot about men not going to college anymore and going back to trade schools. It's an expensive proposition. It's obviously a lot of student debt at a high interest rate these days, and coming out for what jobs, and not getting into the conversation again about politics, but questioning our economy and a job market and where they live geographically. And we all know that's a huge disadvantage being in New York City for that reason. So I think it's relative not only just to college athletics, but to the entire higher education right now. So we'll see how obviously that plays out. But I think truly it's a means of how do we look at NIL. It is advantageous for us because in a weird way, it's narrowed the focus, right? So it's not just anymore, you're not hearing a lot more about, brick and mortar or having personal chefs or having these advantage facilities that maybe some of the larger football schools have. You're not hearing the same about just television, because obviously television's played a role in a lot of programs in terms of getting national prominence and opportunity. Maybe you're not hearing so much about certain geographical areas or wanting to. NIL has changed the playing field in terms of, in essence, creating almost a professional athlete out of these student athletes. And whether we like that or not, that's the nature of where we are. So for an NIL, for St. John's to focus on an NIL in terms of trying to make and help its basketball program be successful, it really has zeroed down and narrowed what our focus needs to be in terms of helping recruiting. It's less about these fancy recruiting trips or fancy recruiting opportunities, or trying to make it as glitz and glamorous as possible. And I think that has just kind of really clearly cleaned up the recruiting landscape in a way. Now, I say that in a very, very expensive way. So obviously that's a challenge in raising those monies, which you know all about. And again, appreciate all your help and support in getting behind NIL. But it's so in a weird way, it's really has narrowed down our focus on what we need to pay most attention to in terms of helping recruiting. But it also has become another expense in the wild world of college athletics in terms of raising more money or finding more partners or finding more alums and boosters that are willing to help and support athletics. I do already see a change, though, David, in the 2 or 3 years. I feel like when it first got started, there was a really clear group of individuals that I'm not, that's not what college athletics is about. Not interested in supporting that. That's not how I want to help my alma mater. That's not how I want to help and give my donations or my investments to the school. I see that already changing. I see that tone changing. I see that being more of an understanding, maybe seeing a more better comfort level of what others are doing and knowing that it's got to impact your competitive balance. We'll see how that continues to evolve in support of, but I've already seen that change the last 2 or 3 years already.
I want to shift focus to a lot of the hot button issues and the things that I'm sure you're going to be asked about. But let's go to this. What can you tell us about the basketball facility that is on the way? What's the current status and some of the features that are going to be inside the 50,000 square foot facility said to be ready by about spring of 27?
So I've been able to sit on 2 initial meetings thus far in my short period of time. One was on my actual press conference day a couple of weeks ago, and one was actually this morning in terms of a little bit of an update. The commitment and passion and leadership of Father Shanley, our board of trustees, Joe Oliva, St. John's University has done nothing but impress me in terms of their focus, specifically for men's and women's basketball. This facility is, state of the art, like nothing I've ever seen in terms of plans here at St. John's University. As I referenced earlier, what Father Shanley had done so well at Providence, including building a practice facility there as well, I think is similar in terms of his tremendous vision, planning, and blueprint for our program. And I've been blown away by the leadership and the clarity in terms of making decisions. And not only just in our practice facility here, David, the health and wellness center here on campus, which I had not seen and been privy to as an alum, truly diving into that space, understanding the value of STEM and health and wellness in terms of curriculum and the recruitment of students in our areas. And the same here with truly showing their commitment as a university to this basketball program. It motivates me, it excites me. So how do we continue to not only fundraise more to get more of the investors on board, as we discussed earlier, but how do we continue to use that as a lightning rod to benefit not just the basketball programs, but all of our Olympic sports, all of our entire athletics department, and again, utilizing basketball to benefit the university and all of our priorities.
There were talks of renovations to Carnesecca Arena for this upcoming season, specifically seatbacks all throughout the lower level. That ended up being pushed to next season, allegedly. Can you talk about what are some plans about upgrades or potential renovations maybe after this season that you have discussed or possibly would like to see? I know Rick Pitino has discussed the importance of the upgrades to Carnesecca as it is such a home court advantage for St. John's.
I've had some really initial conversations, whether that be with Coach Pitino, or with Joe Oliva and Father Shanley about this. And, obviously, yes, seating locations, a little bit of the lower bowl, rounding out the bowl, some additional courtside seating areas, maybe some additional hospitality areas, David. I have not gotten into in depth in terms of design or blueprint on that. I know that's something that in my 20 years of being in and out of St. John's University and being an alum and faculty member here, I've always seen some different ideas. As you know, it's one of those older buildings that's grandfathered in terms of obviously its wonderful age and its charm and its romantic way to it. I'm happy to hear Coach Pitino say that. I think we all love Madison Square Garden and what it means in terms of being the mecca of college basketball, not only for the Big East, but for obviously the NCAA tournaments now and all the conferences that try to come into New York City and find their footprint there, and all the schools that try to find their footprint there. But I think Coach Pitino really knows how tough of a place Carnesecca Arena is for visiting teams to come in and play. So balancing those two objectives and goals, right, of having a true home court, continuing to try to develop Madison Square Garden to be a wonderful destination and fun place for our fans and students. But balancing the two is not an easy challenge, having two venues. But I think it's an exciting one in terms of trying to really reach our goals and objectives for this program and for the university. But it's a priority for sure in terms of how we continue to modernize Carnesecca Arena.
Merchandise, apparel, collaborations with cool brands to amplify St. John's jerseys. These are all hot topics within the fan base on a yearly basis, something that you're very familiar with from your experience. I know there are some plans and there are works with Flat Top Fund as we speak, with some big time collaborations as well. On October 7th, Carl Banks was at practice at MSG. Shortly thereafter, announced he's bringing back the beautiful St. John's retro red satin starter jacket that I've been dying to get my hands on for years. So, Carl, I know that you're around. Your boy needs one. I need that. But as somebody that's very familiar with ad deals and how impactful the right partnership can be, is this something that you and your team are going to be exploring even more to have the St. John's brand and apparel be get more designs out there, more stuff with Nike, more stuff with other brands so that you could see the STJ and the St. John's logo in more places?
I think brand building is essential to everything we do, obviously for our basketball program, obviously for our athletics department, and obviously for our university. I think Coach Pitino brings that brand cachet to him in terms of what he represents as the premium of college basketball. And yeah, I got to see Carl Banks. That was literally my first day on the job for that event at Madison Square Garden. I'm not to make you jealous, David, but he actually gifted me one of those starter jackets, and that's obviously a wonderful addition to my wardrobe. And we all grew up with Starter. I love what he's done with that brand and resurrecting it. I think it's going to be desirable and loved by all fans. And I think the more creative we can be in terms of retro, in terms of vintage, in terms of collaborations, in terms of connecting, as we talked about earlier, with the youth. We need all kids wearing St. John's gear, and they need to be proud to do so. And it needs to be, a hot, trendy thing to do. And obviously, hopefully in conjunction with and in alignment with the success of the program. And I think it has that opportunity. I think Nike's been a great partner in doing that. How do we continue to be creative and think outside the box that way? Because I want all of our students on campus to wear the brand. An old pet peeve of mine, it's been forever, and usually we'll send out some student workers, but if there's kids on campus wearing another school's marks or logos, it just kills me. I understand it, and it's understandable, and maybe they had a sibling that went to that school, maybe they transferred from that school, right? We have transfers everywhere, but really identifying, taking pride, and being the brand, wearing the brand is really, really important. And going to games, David, that everybody's putting on their gear and who you're rooting for, whether you're on the road or at home. It's kind of that brand awareness, that brand building, that brand education that's essential. And I think it's a big part of what we need to do to continue to build here, is not just support the brand from a distance, but buy season tickets like Carl Banks and come to games. And I understand you can't go to every game. It's crazy, but splitting them with friends and inviting friends and family, inviting classmates, inviting children, and introducing that St. John's brand, that St. John's experience to everybody possible. It truly will be contagious. It truly will grow the fan base. It will grow the donor base. It will grow the NIL base. That's really the grassroots effort here that everybody can play a part in, whether they have deep pockets or not, is bringing people back and getting that village to our games.
I'm going to follow up because if I don't, I'm going to get killed on this on social media. Can we expect the retro jerseys coming back this year that were worn last year? I don't know if you've gotten around to that yet. You mentioned it's only a few days, but the retro jerseys that were worn last year from the Felipe Lopez years was a huge hit. Can we see those back? Will we see any other color jerseys this year? And do you anticipate having more/different Nike apparel available for the fans very soon?
I cannot actually, I apologize because I should know this, but I cannot speak to the jersey or the alternatives or what the schedule is. I hope to know that soon. Maybe I could bring that to the next podcast update. I don't know, but I did love the Red Storm revival last year from the Felipe Lopez. And I think, as a kid, I have it at home still or have it somewhere. And that Sports Illustrated cover was everything and anything to a kid growing up in this city and loving St. John's basketball and what Felipe represented. He was LeBron way before LeBron, and we all know what that meant. So I love that they went back to that revival. That was a great uni. At the time, though, David, if you remember, it was not so beloved. So it's great that it has the love that it does now, 30 years later.
You know how fashion is. The old
yeah, listen, I think
and,
it's great. Yeah, it's like the Islanders and the fish stick guy, right? Now
I
that's
love
popular again. I love
fisherman
it.
logo is great.
Yes, I love that that's back. And the same with the Red Storm and what Felipe was. And so I think I have to be as creative and find some unique Nike stuff and collabs. I will say I had a very good Nike meeting yesterday about a partnership that was pretty cool and exciting that I think will get a lot of love from the fan base. So I leave it at that, not to give you a teaser, but those conversations are being had and there's a lot of excitement for this program and Coach Pitino. But that's one that I think you really would like is some of the ideas we were throwing around yesterday. So hopefully sooner than later, we'll be able to announce that.
Awesome. We're going to wrap it up with this. Ed, this is arguably the most anticipated St. John's basketball season of the last 25 years. You were at the Red White scrimmage a few weeks last week. You got a small glimpse of Rick Pitino's year two squad. I'm sure you've seen practice a few times since. What are your impressions of the team and how excited are you to be here to usher in a very exciting season that starts on November 4th?
I appreciate that, David. Yes, I've actually been able to attend a few practices thus far, and it's been great to see the team in action. I don't get involved necessarily in evaluating any of our student athletes, but I could tell you this: I'm really am impressed by the balance. So whether that be speed, shooting, size, athleticism, this roster, you can really see the detail and the fingerprints by Coach Pitino on exactly what he was looking for, exactly what he thinks he needed. And the roster depth is really there. It's really an impressive, athletic, talented depth of a roster that I'm really excited by. What I will comment on is, and it's a big deal these days, sometimes forgotten in the transfer portal world where, every year you really have either a lot of change or a good amount of change in terms of roster. And how does that impact chemistry and relationship building and interaction of a locker room? And how does that interact? I'm really impressed with the relationships the young men have with each other. I think obviously being here all summer these days plays into that, and the summer sessions of school plays into that. But I was really impressed. I kind of felt like they were advanced in terms of their communication levels, their ability with how they had relationships with each other. The chemistry of the team was impressive to me. I also got to take in, obviously, my first experiences, of seeing Coach Pitino in action, and for him, like a mad scientist or an artist in his own laboratory. And I see the players buying into his system and buying in and trusting his system and trusting his staff. So I really was very, very positive and excited by the communication level, the relationships level, the chemistry that I saw from those student athletes. That the Patino way was already evolving and working on them gave me a lot of positivity and excitement for this upcoming season.
That's new Vice President and Athletic Director Ed Kull. Ed, thank you so much for joining us and letting us get to know you a bit. On behalf of the St. John's fan base, we wish you the best of luck. We're excited that you're here helping lead us forward. And I know we'll definitely see you in 2 days, New Jersey, St. John's, Rutgers, to raise some money for the V Foundation as St. John's gets to take on a very talented top 25 Rutgers team. So, Ed, I'll be there. I know a lot of Johnny fans are making the trek down to Piscataway, so I look forward to seeing you there. But thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, David. An honor to be with you all, an honor to be with Johnny's Nation. We are St. John's, but I need to remind everybody that we need everybody's help this season. And that's not just the money grab or the money ask or solicitation. Got to buy your season tickets, got to wear your gear, got to bring your friends with you. I appreciate you going all the way to Piscataway. I'll be okay if you all just show up in Queens and at the Garden this year and do your due diligence. Make it a challenging home court. I said this a couple weeks ago at Louis Carnesecca's 100th birthday celebration. How do we honor Coach the right way in this wonderful 100th year of that man's wonderful life and existence? Let's make his home court the most challenging place to play. Let's help Coach Pitino and his team get behind them. Let's be that real sixth man. I ask you all, please bring a neighbor, bring the youth kids, bring the CYO team, bring that alumni classmate, bring them to games. Everybody needs to come home. Everybody needs to come back. We need you more than ever. And I'm, again, very, very excited and proud to be the athletic director here at St. John's University.
Ed Kull, thank you so much. Johnny Nation, thank you for joining me. We got more on the way later on this week. Rutgers, St. John's, Thursday, the 17th in Piscataway. I will see you there. Johnny Nation, thank you for listening. I'll catch you next time.